All of Walt Disney's classic cartoon characters were created in the era of cell animation, a two-dimensional medium. But in the golden age of Disney feature films, the artists referred to plaster sculptures called maquettes to help them visualize their characters from every possible angle. During the renaissance of Disney animation in the 1980s and 90s, the idea of creating maquettes was revived, thanks to the initiative and talent of an animator named Ruben Procopio. Some of his creations were later replicated for sale to Disney collectors. So I thought I'd call on Ruben and ask him how he transforms a flat character like Donald Duck into a three-dimensional figure. Ruben doesn't come by his skill by chance. His father, Adolfo, worked for Disney Imagineering for many years, creating molds and sculptures for a variety of theme park attractions. So Ruben, it starts with reality, but it turns into caricature, right?
Correct, yes.
So where do you begin? Where do you even begin to draw a duck, let alone Donald Duck?
Well, I first do a lot of research on real animals and what they look like. And in this case, since we're doing Donald, I'll get photographs like this where I can see the proportions of a real duck. And the intention, like what we do in everything in animation, is to capture the spirit from reality into the cartoon. Mm-hmm. So what I'll do is I'll go through many of these and then I'll start doing some sketches like proportions of a real duck, which is a bit elongated and obviously realistic. And then from there, I'll start to, how can I capture some of that into what we're going to do, which is Donald?
And there is a real structure to a duck, and that enables the duck to move and to do whatever he has to do.
Exactly.
And it's not irrelevant to the cartoon version, is it?
No, it's not. As Donald evolved, we have the proportions of a real duck here. And then, again, start doing the same type of construction here. Exaggerating shapes. Adding a little bit of costume to him.
Of course.
Yeah. And his sailor hat. And then you have Donald.
How does this translate into your concept of how you're going to build a duck as opposed to drawing a duck?
I do like blueprint drawings. Start to draw sort of the outside of Donald. And I'm thinking in volume in 3D that this is 360 views and trying to get, okay, let me see, what is the proportions here where I can build an armature and then eventually move him in any shape or position. So once I've got this basic idea here as far as shape goes, I'll start to go in here and figure out, okay, I'm going to need an armature just like a bone structure in a human. That's essentially how I think of the armature.
The armature is a metal skeleton, sort of.
It is. I usually use aluminum wire, and it's easy to bend and move into different shapes and whatnot, and positions. So here, it's as simple as it looks. It is a breakdown of Donald and his proportions. So these are all elements that I need to build before starting to work with clay.
You have all these model sheets here, too, which animators use all the time. How do you refer to them?
We're all surrounded by these model sheets, which show not only the construction of the character, proportions, but also attitudes. And it's approved by everybody working on it, especially the director who is looking for a specific style and look. So I surround myself with this. And you'll see when we go to my sculpting table that I'll have them all around me too, because I'll be peeking out of the corner of my eye constantly as I'm working.
What's next?
The next step is going over to the sculpting table.
So this is how it begins.
It is. This is what we were drawing over on the drawing table there, our armature. And as you can see, it's just the basic skeletal proportions of Donald. Arms, legs, tail, and his head here. So now we're going to move this around to create a pose. Start putting some clay on here, and I'm using a polyform clay, which is a polyester-based clay known as Sculpting, a bakeable clay, and it's nice and soft. And for this purpose, to go on the faster mode and go do something quick, I think this is a perfect medium.
Ruben, your family has quite a history with Disney. Tell us about it.
I grew up around the Disney family. All I can remember is Disney, Disney, Disney since I was about 6, 7, 8 years old. My dad started working at Disney in mid to late 60s. His dream immigrating from Italy via Argentina was to one day work at Disney. Well, his dream came true. He started as a mold maker, working on the big elephants from the Jungle Cruise to the monorail seats to the railings at the Haunted Mansion, anything and everything. I gravitated to the arts, and he saw that, and he started training me and teaching me, and he would even leave me assignments during summer vacation. During my teens, I was sort of a cut above the rest in life drawing and whatnot because I had this great foundation. And eventually getting a scholarship to go to CalArts and getting into their animation program led to eventually starting at Disney. So there we were, now 2 of us, my dad and myself, working at Disney. Years later, as my sister grew up, a position became available over at Imagineering, and she started at the company. So then there was the 3 of us. So combined, we're like 75 years at the company.
Tell me about the way you reintroduced maquettes to the animation department.
One of the first things I did when I got hired at the studio was go to the archives. And I had heard about the little plaster models that they did way back in the 30s and 40s, and how beautiful they were. And I began to ask, well, what happened to this whole process, and why did they do it in the first place? And the answers I got was, well, this was what Walt Disney's idea of helping the animators jump from one picture to another as far as drawing a human character and then an animal character. And it's another tool to visualize it in dimension. So during a period between one picture and another, there was a little bit of downtime, and I started sculpting in my office. And Don Hahn, one of the producers there, happened to come into my office and for a visit, and he said, hey, why don't you show that to Bernie Mattinson? He's the director of The Great Mouse Detective. That's the next show we're doing. And well, he loved it. And as we talked, why don't we do the rest of the characters? Come next show, we decided, okay, let's do these as part of the production.
And the animators must really value having these then.
Oh, absolutely. When you're drawing in a 2D surface like this, you're thinking 3D, but there's a lot of angles that are very difficult. But with a maquette, you could actually look at it, put it in the position you want, and it became like, next to having the actor there, you had the character. Voila.
Tell me about your father's most significant contribution in the realm of Donald Duck.
Well, in both parks at Disney World and Disneyland, there's a hub in the center, as everybody knows, and where there's a statue of Walt Disney holding hands with Mickey Mouse. Well, around that whole monument there to Walt is all these other bronze statues there. And my dad did the Donald Duck in that series, which every time we go over there, we go take a look at it, rub his head, and take pictures, yeah. So that's one of the more memorable pieces my dad did of Donald Duck.
That we can all go and see.
That you could all go and see, yes.